Okay, dads, let's go ahead and get started, guys. Now, some of you've already let me know how uncomfortable you were in last week's meeting. So tonight, we're gonna try to respect each other's boundaries.
What?
Tonight, we've also got a guest with us, David. And would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hey guys, I'm David.
What's up, David?
How many kids do you have, David?
None, at least not at the moment. My wife is pregnant, and she should be delivering any day now.
That's great. Super.
Oh, great.
Who'd like to go first? Anyone? Anyone?
I'll go.
Perfect. Todd? Yes.
My daughter and I went to the mall, and she said she wanted to take the stairs to the second level. And I said, I don't trust stairs because they're always up to something.
Todd, I'm sorry that happened. I encourage you to try to resist the urge to make jokes like that.
My turn? Okay. Can I go? Okay. Yesterday, actually, my daughter got home and she asked me how my day was. And I said, well, a guy tried to sell me a coffin, but that's the last thing I need.
Oh, Jerry, that joke was dead on arrival.
Because it's the last thing I need.
David, how about you?
Oh, I didn't say
This is a
anything.
safe zone. Just jump on in.
Yeah, I guess I'm just scared of being a dad. I'm afraid I'm gonna start telling bad jokes just like my dad.
Well, it might be in our nature. We can fight against it.
Hey, speaking of nature, I tried to catch some fog yesterday. I missed. M-I-S-T.
You're a monster. This is where the boundary is.
I'm done.
This is where you are.
Hello? Really? Okay, yeah, no. Yeah, I'll be right there. That was Julie. Her water just broke. I guess the baby finally ran out of womb. I'm gonna be a dad.
Don't you think you should be going?
Oh, yeah.
So I told my wife she drew her eyebrows too high. She seemed surprised.
We're glad you're here this morning. If you're a dad, we want to say Happy Father's Day. We love you and appreciate you. Our dads have such an impact. I don't think you even realize what an impact that you make because we're so... Oh, yeah, you forgot something. Hey, that's not on me either. The kids can go to Kids Street. I'm feeling good this morning because it's usually me. The kids can go on out, and we need to start putting that in the bulletin, don't we? Amber, we're going to put it on you next week. You got to put it in the bulletin, that spot. All right. Want to say real quick, though, that before we start here, too, Jack is with us this morning. We are so appreciative of Jack. Jack had made us through our home confinement. Every week, he sent me a new joke. It's on this week's as well. Jack, I got you a present. I said, I've had this in my office because I said, when he comes back, I'm going to get him this. It's a Star Wars Scream Saber, lightsaber. This thing is the coolest thing. Let's see if I can do something. Listen, wait a minute.
Press red to record your own.
You are ready, buddy. Thank you for doing such a good job. Now, just because I did it don't mean you get to do it during services. So. Actually, I think it's still going from me. Oh, no. But Jack was such a trooper. I called and asked if he would send me a joke, and he has done it every week. Every Saturday night, I get a joke sent to me by text message, and I try to get it loaded up on Sunday mornings, and he's just been such a trooper. We're actually getting ready to end the electronic version of worship on thing and just go with our live stream. We are doing live stream now. If you're at home, we welcome you as well. And hopefully we'll get all this behind us, and eventually we'll all be back together again. Don't forget that next week we have the send-off parade for the Eli's. Again, that's Saturday, and that is from 9 to 11 a.m. You'll pull up underneath the thing there. They're wanting to bring cards maybe. I think they're fixing up a box for cards, and write them a note. The Eli's have been here. I don't know how long she's taught that Bible class in there, but forever. Ralph has served as an elder here. They're going to be moving to Texas, and we just want them to know that they're going to be truly missed when they're gone. And then, of course, the drive-by wedding shower also on Sunday from 3 to 5 p.m. So make your plans for that. I know Aldrich has done a lot of work in the gymnasium setting up for the virtual, what's it called, Impact. They're doing virtual Impact tomorrow here at the building. He's going to have a live stream in the gymnasium. They've got chairs spread out for distancing. So keep that in your prayers as the young people get involved in that. There's so many good things going on in spite of all the things that are going on. You can watch the news and see those things and get so discouraged with all the different things. Yesterday, I was able to go to Kentucky. I went to Kentucky yesterday and did a wedding in Kentucky, a little girl that I've told some of you the story about her before. She's a beautiful girl. She looked like almost like a Barbie doll. I mean, she is that pretty. And she's about 5'3", about 110 pounds soaking wet. She walked on the Louisville Cardinal basketball team and made the team. Played in the national championship. She literally played in the national championship. You go to Louisville a couple of years back, she was on billboards all over the country, all over the city in Louisville. She was named the favorite player and all that. Just a tremendous young lady. But she got married yesterday, and I was able to do that. It got back about midnight last night from that, and it was just such a blessing to be able to be involved in that. We have babies coming all over the place. We've got several that we've had and several more coming. Keep these ladies in your prayers. But today is Father's Day. One little boy said about Father's Day, he said, it's just like Mother's Day, except you don't have to buy as expensive a gift. My reply to that was, what gift? Mark Twain said, when I was 14 years old, I could not hardly stand to be around my dad. He was so dumb. When I turned 21 years old, I couldn't believe how much he had learned in 7 years. Bill Cosby said, now that my father is a grandfather, he just can't hardly wait to give his money away to the grandkids. So, man, when I was a kid, I would come to my dad and I'd ask him for 50 cents. He would tell me his life story. He would tell me how that when he was 5 years old, at 5 a.m., he'd have to walk 23 miles to milk 90 cows. The farmer that he worked for was so poor that he didn't have a milk bucket. He'd have to put it in his hands and walk for 8 miles, put it in the bucket and come back, all for 50 cents a day. He said, I never got that 50 cents, or 5 cents a day. He said, I never got that 50 cents. Now my kids come over. Granddad says, oh, look, there's my wonderful grandchildren. Let's see how much money Granddad's got for his grandkids. As soon as he lets go of the money, I tell the kids, come over, and I grab it from him and tell them, that is my money. Someone has had some humorous words entitled, The World According to Dad. These are words that most dads, you have probably used them if you're a dad. I know I've used some of these, but these are some universal things that dads say. This is going to hurt you more than it hurts me. Or, quiet, I'm watching a ball game. Or, don't forget, when they get older, don't forget to check the oil. And another one, how should I know? Ask your mother. Or, I'm not made out of money. When I was your age, I walked 5 miles to and from school, uphill, in the snow, up to my waist, both ways, and I liked it. Then another one, maybe, who's paying the bills around here anyway? Or, shut the door, were you born in a barn? Or, do I have to cut every light off on this house? Why? Those kinds of things. Or, how about, don't put your feet on the furniture, your mother's going to kill you. Or, don't get out there and run. If you fall and break your leg, don't you come running to me. Or, again, get down from there before you kill yourself. On second hand, go ahead. Quit playing with your food. Be quiet. Can't you see I'm trying to think? All these are things that some of us said. Why? Because I told you so. Again, if you don't quit, I'm going to call your mother. Or you better get that junk picked up before your mother gets home. How many of you done? I've done that a bunch of times. Just wait until you have kids of your own. One thing I used to tell my kids all the time was we'd make plans and, inevitably something would happen and the plan might have to change. I'd always tell them, all right, we're making plans, but you need to remember this. Plans are made for changing. That was my big thing I would always tell the kids. Or another one, I wasn't asleep, I was just meditating. Yeah. Brethren, I suppose we who are fathers could come up probably another list if you're a dad, some of the things that you've said to your kids so often when they're growing up. Someone has said parents spend the first part of their child's life trying to teach them to talk and to walk, and the rest of their child's life telling them to sit down and shut up. Father said to his daughter, says, "What's wrong, Judy?" Said, "You're usually on the phone for an hour at a time. I noticed you was on the phone. You was only for 30 minutes. Judy replied, "It was a wrong number." Yeah. A letter from a college student to his parents read, "Please send food packages. All they serve around here is breakfast, lunch, and dinner." If you'll get that if you have a boy. Another son wrote home to his dad, said, "Dad, please keep sending me messages. Send me more often. I want to hear from you more often, even if it's only 5s or 10s. But parenting is a challenge and a real blessing. It's probably the best thing that's ever happened in my life. I talked to one dad this morning, Chad Christopher, and I told him, I said, happy Father's Day. I said, you've got 3 wonderful boys. He said, "Oh, that's all on my wife." I said, "Well, she makes you look good." Brother, we're here today to remember the Lord and to honor our fathers. And again, I say, it is probably the most important job in society today. I think even more than mothers at this point in our history. And the reason I say that is, if you look at what's going on in our society today, 60% of children today are born in homes without a father. We wonder why there's so much turmoil in society today. 60%. Let me tell you something. If you're sitting in this auditorium today, and you have your father and your mother both living together in the same house with you, you are in a tremendous minority. We take so much for granted. And fathers, you don't realize what an influence and an impact you have on your children. And so we need to think about this morning. Brother, we're here to think about God, but also to honor our fathers. And I want us to think about some of the things that we ought to say to our dads, thank you. 3 things this morning I think we ought to thank our dads for. The first one is thank them for material provisions. In 1 Timothy chapter 5, in verse 8, he says, "If anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for his immediate family, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." Wow, that is powerful. Worse than an unbeliever. A father who doesn't provide for his family, food and clothing and shelter, he says here, that person has denied the faith and he is worse than an unbeliever. That is huge. Why? Why would he say that? Well, because he's saying that because even an unbeliever provides for his children. Boyce Moulton, a preacher from Junction, Missouri, it's near Joplin, Missouri, wrote these words about his grandfather, which I appreciate. He says, "My grandfather, R.C. Myers, came from Kentucky. He married a Kansas girl, settled down in Indian Territory, later became Oklahoma. They had 16 children. He said, it never occurred to my grandfather that the government should take care of his family. That was his responsibility. He was a law officer from before statehood, but became a sharecropper in order to provide for his children. Their poverty didn't discourage him from taking personal pride in caring for his family. He raised his children without the benefit of electricity or running water. He died without ever having a driver's license. His children, nevertheless, grew up to be hardworking, patriotic, and devoted. And I'm confident, he said, in spite of his poverty, he did a better job of providing for his own than the government could have ever done. Thank God. And thank God for all the fathers that provide the best they can for their families. Thank you, fathers. You go to work. A lot of times, you don't appreciate, well, Dad's not home enough. Listen, he's working hard to try to provide for his family. And we appreciate that. You should appreciate that. You need to know, I guess another one fathers would say, money doesn't grow on trees. You got to work out and get it. And these dads do that. And they work hard. And they provide for their family. And so we need to thank our fathers for providing for their families, as so many do, in such a wonderful way. Second thing we need to do is we need to thank them for faithful instruction. Thank them for faithful instruction. Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 4 says, "Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in training and instruction in the Lord." He tells us that fathers have the responsibility. The CEV says it this way: parents, don't be hard on your children. Raise them properly. Teach them and instruct them about the Lord. By the way, the greatest thing you could ever do, and I want to, talk about fathers and compliment on our fathers. You fathers that are here today are heroes. Because there's, Mother's Day is probably one of our biggest Sundays of the year. Father's Day is usually one of our less filled times of the year. Why is that? Because a lot of fathers see this as Father's Day. This is my day. I'm going to go out and do this. But you have chosen to be here today to set an example for your children, to worship God and put Him first. And let me tell you something, our children are watching you, as we watched in the video just a moment ago. Our children are watching you and the example that you're setting and the priorities that you have. And if you don't think they are, you're crazy. You need to take responsibility to setting the example. Rather than telling your kids what to do, show them how to do it. Show them how to live out life. The Living Bible says, don't keep on scolding and nagging your children, making them angry and resentful. Rather, bring them up in loving discipline of the Lord Himself approves. Fathers instruct their children about many things. A lot of things that fathers can do better than anybody else. My kids were growing up, I would instruct them, don't be afraid to ask questions in school. You can't learn anything unless you ask. And like many parents, I'm sure I said, and I don't care what everybody else is doing, you're not doing it. How many have you done that? They'll come home, well, everybody else is doing this. Well, number one, you're not everybody else. And number two, I don't care what they're doing, you're not going to do it. Of course, we've all done this one. If they all jumped off a bridge, would you jump off with them? That kind of thing. But, we instruct them. And we do that because we love them. Fathers have given all kinds of instructions to their kids, such things as school and work and relationships and dating and driving and all those kinds of things. So many different things. How to treat a woman. Again, my friend said of his father after he passed away, he says, more memorable than my household responsibilities was the endless stream of corrections I got from my father. My father never stopped correcting me. Just short before he died, he looked at me in the hospital bed with loving eyes and says, you need to take care of that paunch. Yeah. He went on to say, though, I gave reverence to my father. I was afraid not to. He would have taken the belt off if I dared to disobey. He tried to teach me anything that would help me in life. It was, he said I was thumped on the back of my head so many times I couldn't count. Told to straighten up. He insisted that I take my elbows off the table and stop eating like an animal. He never hesitated to tell me to wash my face, comb my hair, brush my teeth, shine my shoes. Sometimes he would say, you act like you fell out of a hickory nut tree on your head. Or worse, he would say, son, you'd have to go to summer school to qualify to go to an insane asylum. But he said, my dad taught me so many things about life. A man by the name of John Burton said these words about being a father. He said, when I was young, baseball was my life. He said, I can imagine the excitement. He said, you can imagine the excitement I felt when I had a son. I could teach him all the things that I know about baseball. And the boy wanted to play ball. So I was so excited I would go with him to the game, never miss a game, and I would try to teach him all the things that I'd learned about baseball. And if my son would just listen, I could make him one of the greatest baseball players ever. Learning to read a curveball, shifting his body weight with a swing, steal bases, turn double plays. These things separate the amateurs from the pros, and I was going to teach him all about it. He said, though the problem came was there was a pattern in our relationship that developed. Because of my familiarity with the game, I saw every mistake that my son made. In addition, I knew how to correct them. He said, so post-games home began a thing where I would sit him in the car and tell him about all the things, critique and how he could improve his game. He said, it soon got old with my son. So my son finally one day had enough of it. He said, Dad, could you not start by telling me everything I did wrong and start telling me something I did right? Brethren, faithful instruction is important, but we need to be careful how we do it too. There are a lot of parents, a lot of dads who never told their kid they've done a good job. What does he say? Don't keep scolding and nagging your children. Now, yes, you need to correct them. Yes, you need to show them when they've done something wrong, but you also need to tell them when they do what is right. And show them and love them. Tell them how you love them. And you know, it's amazing that if you will love on your children when it comes time to discipline your children, and he talks about that too. By the way, you who are opposed to discipline, maybe we could, spanking a baby is a bad thing. And I'm going to tell you, he says, bring them up in the loving discipline the Lord himself approves, and the Lord approves of spanking your children when he does bad. And I can show you a bunch of verses in the Bible that says so. Where it says that if you do not spank your children, you hate your child. And that I love the one where it says, if you spank him, he won't die. He may think he is, but But you need to discipline them, but you need to discipline them lovingly. I can remember with Michelle, she was the worst one. Oh my goodness. That child. If I ever spanked her, it was always, but I tried to. I'm not saying I was always the dad that I need to be. I'll just be right up front. But my policy was, and my general practice was that if she got in trouble, or if any of the girls got in trouble, I would sit them down and I would talk to them about what they had done. And we would go over it. They would have to repeat back to me. And I would explain to them before they got a spanking, if you do this, this is going to be what's going to happen. And so, sure enough, they do it. And, Melissa was the best. I hated to spank that child because every time I'd do it, she would be there, and she just knew how to play the game. She would look at me and like, oh, wise father, you are so true. And she would literally lay over my lap to get a spanking and get it over with. Michelle, on the other hand, it was what should have taken 5 minutes would take an hour. Because she would negotiate all through this thing. She thought it was a big negotiation session. Dad, I said, well, what did I tell you? Well, you told me this. Okay, what did I tell you was going to happen if you did this? Well, you told me I was going to get a spanking. But Dad, if you'll just let me by this time, I'll never do it again. I said, when I get done, I believe that'll be true. And then she would try to negotiate, Dad, but just this time. Well, but why don't you just give me a soft spanking this time? I said, there's no such thing. I said, what did I tell you? Well, Dad, you told me this. What did you do? Well, I did this. So if I do not do what I told you I'd do, I would have lied to you. But I said, more than that, you would have thought there's a way to get out of things. When you make a mistake, there are consequences to your actions. And a lot of kids today don't realize that. Because they're never disciplined, and they don't ever have any consequences to their actions. And when something happens that they do wrong and someone actually does something to them when they get older, they are shocked. I think that's part of the problem that we got right now. You wrestle a policeman to the ground and take his weapon and you get shot. And how could that happen? Well, you did wrong. If he'd have been taught when he was a child that there are consequences to wrong actions, he might have thought about it. That's why I say dads are so important. By the way, and you know, I mentioned that it's actually 60 to 80% of all children are born in families without a father to instruct them. But again, you can do it in the wrong way. I've known some dads that were constantly criticizing and demeaning that child, and that is just as wrong. You do not have the right to discipline that child unless you have loved that child and shown that love. And I'm going to tell you, you know, and I don't, my dad came from a different generation. I don't believe I ever heard my dad tell me that I love you. Never. Not once. He showed me in many ways, but he never said it. I would encourage you to tell your children that you love them every day. I try to call my children, can't with Michelle, but I do the other two every day. I call them every day. Now, I'm not like my wife. I don't spend an hour on the phone with them trying to find out everything that's ever gone on with them, and what every kid has done, and how many times you had to wipe their britches and all that kind of stuff. I don't do that. But I say, hey, man, how's it going today? And how you doing? And I just called check on you. How's your day going? I love you. Might be just that long. That means a thing. And I'm telling you, parents, fathers, thank you for you who have shown your children, who have taught your children, who've instructed your children in things. And again, you know, that boy that said, you know, I told my dad, says, you know, when I get in the car, why don't you tell me something I've done right first before you start telling me everything? You know, that instruction, we need to be careful how we deliver it. All criticism and no praise is no good. Are you a coach or a critic? Again, Ephesians 6:4 says, don't keep on scolding and nagging your children, making them angry and resentful. Now, here's a sad confession of one father. He says, I took my children to school, but not to church. I taught them to drink, but not the living water. I enrolled them in Little League, but not in Sunday school. I showed them how to fish, but not to be fishers of men. I made the Lord's Day a holiday rather than a holy day. I taught them that the church was full of hypocrites and made the greatest hypocrite of them and me. He goes on to say, I gave them color TV and didn't provide a Bible. I handed them the keys to the car, but I didn't give them the keys to the kingdom of heaven. I taught them how to make a living, but failed to teach them who Christ was and that Christ alone makes a life. Brothers and sisters, you need to thank your fathers for faithful instructions he gave you in life, for all the good advice, and especially the instructions including the Lord. Thank you for material possessions. Thank you for faithful instructions. And I'm going to tell you again, I repeat this, you dads are here today have sent a tremendous message to your children. And I thank you. And your children should thank you. Third thing, thank you for godly illustrations. By this I mean godly illustrations for life, or a godly example of life. Your being here is one of those. 1 Corinthians chapter 11 verse 1, Paul said to the Corinthians who were children of faith, he said this, he said, follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. Now please notice, Paul didn't say, do everything that I do. Do everything that I do that's Christ-like. He said, do everything I do that Jesus would do. Follow the example of Christ. Paul was imperfect and neither are we. But we need to encourage our children. We need to look at our children and say, do I want them to follow the things that I'm doing? What do I want my children to do? Again, I lived in a family. Again, my dad and mom loved us to death, but, and I'm they smoked like my dad smoked like a freight train. I mean, he smoked, and I think, how do you tell your kids not to smoke and you're puffing away? I have two brothers that smoke. I didn't. I couldn't stand to be around it, but, you tell them don't drink, and then you've got it in your refrigerator. You can argue all day long. I don't care. You can argue the attributes that, oh, it's okay as long as you do it and a little bits and all that. How do you teach a teenager that? Be careful the signals that you send, the bad examples that you lead. But, I've also but I know, all of us, we've done some bad things that we don't want our kids to do. We've also done some good things, some godly things, some Christ-like things, which I hope that they will copy from my life. Follow me as I follow Christ. The more important thing is being a loving people. One man said, when I was a teenager, Dad would come in the room and say, "Come on, kid, let's go." "Where to?" "Well, we're going to Lucy's." Once a month, Dad would visit Lucy Butchko, a woman whose body was twisted and pinned in a wheelchair by arthritis. He would reach his arms around her frail body, lift her out of the wheelchair, place her in the front seat of a brown station wagon. He said he would fold up the wheelchair, throw it in the back, drive Lucy to the monthly communion service for the shut-ins. He said Dad was the vice president of a publishing company who was shuttling shut-ins. He said later, while he was in the hospital trying to recover from a massive heart attack, Dad found out that the family down the street didn't have enough money to pay for their groceries. Said Dad wrote a check. Said it was the last thing he ever wrote. What an example. I call that what a father, what a man he was, in the sense that great illustration of what Christ was. Here's another. A man said of his father, says, "Once I was a teenager, my father and I were standing in a line to buy tickets for the circus. Finally, there was one family between us and the ticket counter. A family," he said, "this family made a big impression on me. They had said they had 8 children, all under the age of 12. You could tell that they didn't have a lot of money. They said their clothes were not expensive, but they were clean. The children were well behaved. They were standing 2 by 2 behind Mom and Dad. Mom was standing there holding her husband's hand. They were expecting the kids. They were jabbering about the clowns and the elephants and the acts that they were going to see that night, all excited about going." He said you could just tell they'd probably never been to a circus before. It promised to be the highlight of their lives. The father and mother were the head of the pack, standing proud as they could be. Again, the mother was holding the father's hand, looking at him, saying like, "You're my knight in shining armor." The ticket lady asked the father how many tickets did he want. He proudly said, "Let me have 8 children's tickets, 2 adult tickets, so I could take my family to the circus." The lady quoted the price for the tickets. The man's wife let go of his hand. Her head dropped and his lip began to quiver. The father leaned over and said, "How much did you say that was?" The ticket lady quoted the price again. The man didn't have enough money to pay for the tickets to go in. He said, man, he would look at him like, "How am I supposed to tell my family that I don't have the money to take them in to hear? They've been waiting for this for so long." Seeing what was going on, he said, my dad reached his hand in his pocket, pulled out a $20 bill, and dropped it on the ground. Now, he said, we weren't wealthy in any sense of the word. Said, my father reached down and picked up that $20 bill and said, "Excuse me, sir, I believe you dropped this on the ground." Of course, the man knew what was going on. Said he wasn't begging for a handout, but certainly appreciated the help in a desperate, embarrassing situation. He looked straight at my dad's eyes, took both of my dad's hand and squeezed tightly on that $20 bill. And he said, with quivering lips, tears streaming down his cheeks, he said, "Thank you, thank you. This really means a lot to me and my family." He said, brethren, the man telling that story about his father said, my father and I went back to the car and drove home. We didn't go to the circus that night because he used the money for this family. He says, but I didn't go without. He said, what a father my dad was. What a godly illustration of Christ. Thank God for all fathers who've been godly illustrations, godly examples to follow. And let me tell you something, your kids are watching. There's so many things I could tell you. I want to read you a letter to a dad. It says, Dad, there's so many things I could tell you to your face. He says, I either lack the words or fail to find the time and place. But in this special letter, Dad, you'll find, at least in part, the feelings that our pressing years have left within my heart. The memories of childhood days and all that you have done to make our home a happy place and growing up such fun. I still recall the walks we took, the games we often played, those confidential chats we had while wrestling in the shade. This letter comes to thank you and for needed words of praise. The counsel and guidance too that shaped my grown-up days. No words of mine can tell you, Dad, the things I really feel. But you must know my love for you is lasting, warm, and real. You made my world a better place. And through the coming years, I'll keep these memories as cherished souvenirs. Dads, you are critical to your children's self-esteem. I'll just tell you, your children's view of God usually comes from their dad. I mean, don't we call God our Father? Think about that. We wonder why so many children leave the church when they grow up. Sometimes with parents who went to church. Now, sometimes it's not your fault at all. You had nothing to do with it. But oftentimes, it comes from dads who was one way at church and another way on the way home, who didn't love their children and respond to them in loving ways, who didn't set the example that they should have, and those things. And if you're one of those dads, I want to tell you that you know what? It may be because your father wasn't the man that he ought to have been. But you can break that chain. You can be the man that God wants you to be. Rather than look to your earthly father, look to your heavenly Father for the example that you need. If you're here today and your dad, we love you and we appreciate you. Happy Father's Day. What a great day. We love you and appreciate you, and we want you to know, we want to say thank you. If you're here today and you may not be, you may be a bad dad, you can make that right. You can set an example for your children by walking down this aisle and saying, I have not been the dad I need to be. Or better, when you go home, sit down with them and say, you know what, I've not been the dad that I ought to have been, but I'm going to be a better dad because I love you and I want you to have the best that you can have. And I love you. If we can help you this morning, maybe you need the prayers of the church. Maybe you need to respond to the gospel call and become a child of God. You'll never have a better father than the one you have in heaven. And if we can help you this morning, I want to encourage you. As we stand, we offer the invitation.